All right. Hello, everyone. It's a joy and honor to be here today with Nora White. Nora is a healer, a sacred intimacy coach, and an all around inspiring woman. Nora, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, great to
It's
be
a
here
pleasure.
with mm. So I wanted to start off and just dive into the work that you're doing because I'm curious about it. So I wanted to ask, what is the work you're doing with people these days? And how does it flow and what are the impacts of it?
Mm. I'm called the body of work sacred intimacy. The core of my practice is sexological body work. So that's me working in person with people in long form sessions, up to 4 hour sessions, really um, targeted to move some energy blocks or conditioning that a person might have around the relationship that they have with pleasure or the relationship they have with their bodies. Um, this was the line of work that really, in fact, knocked on my door about a decade ago. I could go into telling this story, but I feel like that might not be the most applicable and relevant right now. Um, but that's how this work came into my life, where I recognized that um, m- most humans don't really have a good concept of how much energy their body can circulate if they allow to enter a level of the nervous system um, without the agenda that normal intercourse or normal intimacy usually carries. Right. So it's just a completely different way of entering in contact with the body when you work with someone in a therapeutic way. And yeah, it revealed to me just how much can shift, how much can heal in that field. So that's the core of the work. And then my practice has grown significantly through COVID, from in person work to online work. So I always work with people before an in person session, anyways, to understand their context, where they're coming from, what are we going to be focusing on. But from that place, I've realized that we could really expand the ability of transmitting the medicine and the work that I do through in person through online coaching. So now I do a lot of online coaching as well, and I lead a group, like a training once a year for women, where they get to reconnect with their bodies on their own during a 3 months period of time. Yeah.
Beautiful. So you mentioned how much energy can circulate through the nervous system when there is no agenda. I'm curious to hear more about that. Like, what happens when that energy starts to circulate? Is there an increase in power, aliveness, healing? What are the kind of effects of that?
Yes. So that, thank you for asking this question. In some ways, that is what was the most striking to me, is that in some ways, when we enter an intimate exchange with someone that we like, there's often all of the narrative and the dynamic that plays into the way that we're exchanging energy, which is a beautiful thing, and it's something on its own. But what I noticed through my trainings and tantra and um, um, the many different experiences that I chose to follow at some point in my life was that when I worked without that exchange, without that interaction with someone that actually mattered to me, there was an ability to receive a kind of touch that had no agenda, that was really following the language of my own body. And what I found through that is that indeed um, the levels that can unearth can be even deeper, because we are so focused and dedicated to being attuned to the body, not too fast, not too soon, not going anywhere. And in fact, it's this sort of antidote that is a little bit of a paradox, is that by not trying, but staying consistent on the task, regardless of results, then can open an experience that I found was akin to working with medicines. And at the time, I was much more interested in working with medicine until I realized, wait a minute, the body has the same potential if we know how to work with it. And that blew me away. And that's when I recognized that I was at that point only following that path for my own pleasure and interest. But at that moment, I realized, wow, this is significant and can change the world.
Mm. And how would you say it can change the world? I'd love to hear more about that.
Recognizing that this life, that this energy that lives in our bodies is always there waiting to be harnessed and is there for our liberation, for our purpose of healing. And when I mean healing, I simply mean entering states of healing. I'm going to just make a note here because I'm on my houseboat and we're about to get rocked. And so you might see my dog who is not loving this, but it wasn't that bad. Um, It's healing in many ways. First off, just simply the physiology of the body expanding and releasing, expanding and releasing is healing, just like any form of paroxysm. And you can go for a run, or you can have an orgasm, or you can dance your buns off, or do some dynamic meditation, or do some breath work, and simply allowing the blood to pulse through your body to a maximum paroxysm and let that release just simply brings the body back in a parasympathetic state that is very profound and has the opportunity, as the tension goes up, to unearth some of the emotions, some of the memories, some of the sentiments that live in us, but that don't have enough energy in the system to move and to be exposed and to be processed, right? So that's one aspect of the therapeutic aspect. And the second one is that by putting ourselves in a state of first complete attunement, then we can reach peace, we can reach trust. And from that place, we can open into pleasure. And then once we feel really good about ourselves, the way we look at every other story or memory or challenges we've gone through, we get to see them from a completely different perspective, right? And then we can rewrite some memories, right? So that's the other therapeutic application.
Yeah, beautiful. I can really see the similarity to medicine work now because when I think of medicine work, it's like the medicines open a window or a portal where there's an influx of high frequency energy for a few hours time in my experience. And that high frequency energy, it's just like it activates the body and the system and it pulls stuff up. It pulls stuff up and out. Stuck energies just get moved to the surface. And so I can see what you're saying, that basically the Eros, this kind of power source, this primal power source deep within the body, within the energetic system, can be used in the same way if you learn how to activate it, call upon it, channel it through the body. It can, yeah, be utilized just like medicine to bring up these deep karmic knots and wounds and baggage and ancestral stuff and process it and heal it and release it in the light of awareness.
Absolutely. I love that you're bringing this up because here you're already basically bridging what I put at odds earlier. I said, when you're with a partner, it tends to go one way. And when we're working therapeutically, it works another way. What you're actually saying is actually we can, with our most beloved people, enter that state of therapeutic intimacy. And that is exactly why I believe it can change the world. Because if we're only equipped to know what can happen and how and what to look out for, then we can actually stop playing what we've seen necessarily in movies, or, it's great sometimes, but also recognize that we're sitting on this potential that is so much deeper and that it's just a different offering. It's an entering a space of sort of service and devotion to the evolution of the soul of our partner, for instance, right?
Yeah, well said. That's really fascinating and exciting that that exists at all, that that possibility is there. And I wanted to ask you, how has your work evolved over time, and what have been some of the big aha moments that took the work deeper?
So I first worked myself in person with people. And then during the pandemic, I was invited to be part of a platform that no longer exists, sadly, but that was called Coach. And that was a beautiful space for people who were locked up at home, who were seeking to understand what to do with their erotic energy, which was present. They were not feeling fulfilled reaching out to porn. They were understanding that this was still something very alive in them, especially in a moment so disconnected from the rest of the world. And perhaps they also were going through the dark night of the soul, just having the time to sit down and recognize whether how they may have contributed to their previous relationship, which hadn't been really fulfilling or had failed in some way, shape, or form. So then I was facing people who were more open to actually have a dialogue that included their bodies because it was self pleasure coaching, right? So we had the screen that gave us that privacy, but that allowed to, in fact, enter states that are very tender if we go slow enough and we stay connected. So it was sex therapy brought on by the embodiment and the activation of the body. So super powerful stuff, which I don't think I had the foresight to see how well the work could translate online. Like before the pandemic, if you had told me that I could do my work online, I wouldn't really have believed it because obviously I was working on hands-on bodies, right? And that was that was one of the big aha moments, and that's when I also understood that there was a lot of sort of lack of information out there, like a lot of curiosity from people to know where to start to engage with this erotic energy in a way that felt nourishing and not depleting. So that brought me to the next step where I recognized there were some questions that were asked to me that were kind of repeatedly the same or touching on certain themes. And I decided, okay, like I don't want to, talk to six people in a day and say six times the same thing. So how about I put that information in a video, in a guided audio, and that's how my course was created. Right. And the course is called the Love Doctor Training. And the idea is how can you become the love doctor to your own self? Because ultimately, it starts with understanding how to wield that energy and engage with that energy with our own selves. Because when we do so, then we know how to be with others as well. Right.
Beautiful. Thank you. And so we're talking here about erotic energy and Eros, and I'm wondering for you if you have a philosophy or a sense of what is Eros, what is erotic energy, how does it relate to source energy, life force energy? Is it just all the same energy, or yeah, what's your understanding of that?
Actually, I believe that there's so much conditioning around our erotic energy that that's where it gets a little bit tricky. And so, as far as I'm concerned, when I enter a work and a session, and what I learned from my teacher is that as a practitioner, we actually stay in the truth of what we'll call like a white energy, a source energy, a love frequency, rather than a love emotion, so that we're actually becoming this vessel to allow the life force to flow through us without entering that red erotic energy that has this interpersonal sort of narrative often, right? Of course, because of the conditioning that we have around it, I'm using those terms even in this call a little bit interchangeably, but now that you're going to that level of granularity, I can kind of explain how different that can manifest.
Interesting. So are you then kind of channeling this white light source energy into the other person's field and helping them kind of utilize that to purify the erotic energy, or how does that work? How are these energies interacting?
Mm. Well, I would have never put it in those terms, mostly because, but it's not that it's not a good visualization. Um, I do believe that as a space holder, fundamentally the role is to be there in the most neutral way and the most attuned way to what's happening for the body of the other person. But that, in fact, our role is pretty removed because what we're here to do is to create the condition for this person's body to heal themselves. Right? The whole concept of healing and a guru is not the person that heals you, is the person who creates the condition in which you can heal yourself. So of course we respond to the people we have in front of us. That's the truth. It's not that our presence as facilitator doesn't matter, and it's not that it doesn't make a difference. But fundamentally, it's very important that each person that undergoes this transformative process for themselves recognizes that they're doing it. They're, even if it's just a matter of allowing it, it's the first time ever they're allowing themselves to release whatever tension they're normally carrying. And that is them giving their body the go ahead to do what's necessary for healing.
Interesting. And I'm curious, are you attempting to guide them to access that kind of white light source energy within themselves and bring that into their own system? Or are they accessing the red energy? Or what are you guiding them to do?
So that's where I wouldn't put it in those terms of white and red because first off, there's nothing that you can do that is really wrong. Like I don't want anybody to like start thinking about whether they're doing it right or wrong. I'm definitely encouraging them to tap into what they're feeling and to name it with a texture, temperature, color, but we're not putting the white in the white is good and the red is bad. Like right now, we're welcoming all of the colors of the rainbow, whatever wants to come up. The idea is that we simply want to be present for what the body has to tell us. And every person works differently, has an ability to create mental imagery. But the reason why it's helpful to inquire, could you give a color to what you're sensing and the location where you're sensing it, is because it allows the person to occupy the bandwidth of the mind with what's actually happening with the body, right? And that in and of itself is actually helping people be much more present with their process in case there is some form of conditioning that would normally have them dissociate from the activity because there's such a complex relationship with pleasure, right? Your body knows that it's good for you, but your conditioning might have told you that it's not. And therefore, when you do engage with it, many people have a tendency to dissociate from it. And that's when it becomes unconscious. And then that's when it becomes an unconscious erotic energy. And that is the one that is the least supportive to people. In fact, that is the one that's harder to engage with, right? Either we suppress it, neglect it, or we abuse it, but it's hard to know how to interact with it in a wholesome, supportive way. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's helpful for sure. So it's kind of like it's all source energy and all colors of the rainbow are welcome, and we trust the body's intelligence to do whatever it's doing with whatever color or flavor of energy is coming up. and at the same time, there's a certain bandwidth of energy that you're attempting to kind of hold or remain in yourself as a space holder in this kind of white light energy while you just allow the person's body to go into whatever kind of energetic process it needs to, and it's all welcome and it's really trusting the intelligence of the body, something like that.
Yes. I guess what might be helpful to to know also is that the work that I do in person is a one-sided touch, right? And that already kind of helps imagine that there is a lot less space for the confusion uh, that whatever the person is feeling has to do with an interpersonal exchange. So it helps people be have ownership over their experience, and then whatever might happen, right? There might be moments where they'll be taken back into their brain with images or populates their subconscious when their body is in an intimate space. And that's okay. It's part of the process. But my job is to help them stay conscious and present with it, because really the all the colors of the rainbow are welcome as long as we can stay as conscious as possible with them. Right. My job is to help people stay conscious with what's happening for them so that they can bring this back into their everyday life.
Yeah,
So it's
beautiful.
interesting because it is about liberation, but it is about being present with that experience of liberation. Right.
Yeah, beautiful. And so just to be clear, when you are touching people, you're not trying to do any kind of energy work or Reiki or something in your training. You are just kind of a pure witness, or what is your conception of that? Because obviously some people do kind of energy work and channeling and Reiki and this type of thing, and it sounds like your training is more like you're not seeing yourself as a conduit for giving energy to the people. So I hope these questions are okay. I'm just actually really curious, so I'm trying to understand.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I am actually attuned to Reiki. I have been for so long at this point. And so, in the way that I understand it, though, is that it's not, it cannot not happen, right? But I don't go into it telling you that I'm going to insufflate this energy in you, and I'm not actively thinking about doing that unless it's really called for, and unless I can see that there's a great constriction where I can try to move and help. But it is not really what is supportive to someone's. I don't think it helps people knowing any of that necessarily. I just think it's a byproduct of being in front of another person. Like, it's impossible not to respond to another person's energy field in some ways, but it's important to recognize that what is occurring in that field is fundamentally a process that is initiated by the person for themselves. I know that you know it. Each must save themselves. Each must heal themselves. And the way that I work is really to help people recognize that in themselves.
Hmm, beautiful. Thank you. And I'm curious, how can this Eros or primal energy, life force energy, how can it be harnessed for purposes of magic or manifestation? Do you have any experience or thoughts about that?
Yes, I would love to speak on that, especially that it's such a simple message that I feel has so much power for people in their relationships. Um, Especially if I'm talking to men in heterosexual relationship. At this point, I recognize that this a conversation of entering intimate space being in orientation to pleasure and not to orgasm or ejaculation, right? Then will change completely the way that you can be with your partner. And so having ejaculatory choice, achieving ejaculatory mastery is something I encourage every man I meet to take very seriously. It would be such a shame to reach the end of your life and not know what can happen if that part of your body, that part of your physiology, is something that you have befriended. Because there is such a simple truth that what female pleasure can open for both people is absolutely otherworldly. Like you can never imagine, you can only underestimate the bounty that can come from liberating yourself through liberating her. And so right now I'm trying to really simplify this talk and say, we could work at all the superficial level of the relationship for a very long time. But if but focus on that piece and half of your question will be gone. And that will allow you to directly enter that space where you can cultivate um, energy in a sort of very infinite way, because instead of just going for orgasm, we're going to enter orgasmic state.
And then the connection to magic and manifestation is like, as you cultivate that energy, you can then intentionally direct it kind of wherever you choose, or how would you connect that to magic and manifestation?
Yes. And this is super simple neuroscience, actually, that we understand really well. Classical neuroscience with two postulate. The first one is the Hebb postulate, that neuron that fire together, wire together. So if while you're feeling really good, you are bringing in the knowing, the visualization of what you are meant to be, do, or have, you simply allow that connection to form the neural circuitry. And then it immediately also works with the Pavlovian conditioning of priming you to know that this thing is good and right for you. And so, therefore, when you walk through the world, you are very prone to see the any little clues that will get you closer to this thing that you're calling in. And I think this is really, I love this conversation. I work with sex magic a lot. I've been sharing a sex magic practice every year for the past 6 years around the end of the year, because it's such a good time when people are closing up a chapter and opening a new one. And yes, it's all magical and quantum. And also, if we're really down to earth, we can explain it in very simple terms, why it works to call in the visualization of what you know is yours to have while in high states of pleasure.
Mm, love that. Thank you. And that brought up something for me, a bit of a personal share, but a couple years ago, I was guided by a teacher into a kind of like shadow work sex magical practice. And it was extremely powerful, more than I had realized. And it actually ended up bringing up a lot. And I felt almost like taken over by this kind of primal dark dragon energy for a period of days. And it was quite destabilizing at the time. I was able to mostly contain the ramifications. Like, it didn't have too many negative ramifications in my life, even though it was like I became almost like a different version of myself, because it was a some kind of either deeply repressed energy or a very primal archetypal energy. And having integrated that now to a great extent, I'm actually really grateful for that. And at the same time, it alerted me to potential dangers of some of these types of practices. And so I wondered, do you have any like warnings about where sex magic could go wrong, or kind of like more auspicious ways to work with sex magic versus like ways that could be potentially destabilizing?
Hmm. Well, thank you for sharing, and I'm glad to hear that you find it integrated today. I think the crux is really about this ability to make sense of what occurred and to befriend it. Because in my world, even though I work with people who have had very challenging past experiences that have marked them, that sometimes make intimacy difficult, I have seen so many times that even with such a difficult conditioning, someone can open to great pleasure. Someone can open to great pleasure if we stay with them in a very attuned way. So, not to, and the reason why I'm sharing this is because I believe that if you can create that level of attunement and trust between two partners, and that you can pair it with what I shared before, which is having ejaculatory choice and entering an interaction not for succumbing to that pleasure, but in fact, really basking in it, then like really living it, then both your partner and yourself can hold this primal fuck and this sort of full fuck. And they love it, you love it. It's actually good. It's actually not something to be scared of in the way that I teach it, but it can take many steps to befriend the dragon. Right.
Yeah, I love this phrase, befriend the dragon. It's so interesting you say that because I have that lyric in a rap song somewhere while I've been processing this experience. It's, really come through like befriend the inner dragon. At the same time, I think I would just offer a general disclaimer to people that specifically combining shadow work with sex magic, I personally underestimated how powerful that could be. It was almost more like a kind of like dark sex magic ritual that I was guided to undergo, and I didn't really fully understand what could be unlocked. So I think I would just offer to people, you know, just be aware that this stuff can be extremely powerful. I think similar with psychedelics, we can underestimate what is actually laying dormant in the unconscious and what can be unlocked and how gargantuanly powerful these forces can be, these primal forces. And, especially when we mix it with kind of shadow work and working with darker archetypes, it can be very, very intense. And again, I'm now glad that it happened, and like now it feels like I have access to a power source that I probably wouldn't have had access to otherwise. But at the time, if I hadn't had so much psychedelic experience and experience with crazy mystical phenomena, I don't know how well I would have handled that, because it already created quite a disturbance in my life. I became really like grandiose, really inflated, really like like really intense, really like kind of like power and greed and sex were like were really coming to the forefront, like repressed levels of extreme lust, extreme greed, extreme like power hungriness. And so I was just kind of overtaken by my shadow for a period of days. And so I just kind of want people to know that that type of thing is possible when you play with these types of energies, especially in the realm of like shadow work or kind of shadow magic type stuff. So I didn't expect to bring that up in this conversation, but it just, yeah, came up. So
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. May I ask a question? How could you tell us more about how the shadow work was brought into the experience of sex magic?
yeah, so it was pretty much like we were in a group container. This actually took place on Zoom, and we were instructed to like activate the sexual energy. So we were all like self-pleasuring in on Zoom, and there was kind of like darker, shadowy music playing, and the guide basically guided us to invoke or invite in some kind of like archetypes that we personally feel triggered by or feel like fear around. And I basically took that to the extreme And I was activating the sexual energy while visualizing like archetypes of like serial killers and like reptilian beasts and like Jeffrey Dahmer type stuff. So I basically went to the most extreme. I was just like, well, this is what we're being invited to do, so I'm going to kind of trust the practice. And I went to the most kind of extreme archetypes I could imagine, like Hitler type stuff. And that is what opened some kind of a wormhole to a very, very dark dragon energy that basically took me over for a few days. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that, in fact, whoa, yeah, that makes sense with what we were discussing before, right? So the importance of pairing this practice with things that are actually you want for yourself, things that are supportive of the thriving of you and your family and your environment and your ecosystem, right? Because your body will remember it as good or welcome, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I would classify that more as like white sex magic or like white magic, white wizardry,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I do think people can be careful too around. I think if you try to manifest too many things that are like materially based, it's often easy for the ego to be kind of involved in that. But I feel like the purest forms of white magic to me are when you're primarily focusing on like qualities you want your life to be radiating, like love, gratitude, vibrancy, abundance, beauty, joy. So to me, yeah, that whole experience led to me discovering that there really is like a spectrum of magic out there, and there's like more karmically auspicious forms of magic, and then there are more karmically inauspicious forms of magic which can have karmic consequences that are, unwelcome. So I guess that just this conversation brought that up to kind of just give that disclaimer for people that that type of thing is out there. And yeah, I didn't really know what I was getting into when I
and we are bringing also a zoom in on an aspect of sex magic or any type of manifestation practice that is pretty granular but very important, which is that fundamentally what we're attracting is a feeling. And so some often in manifestation practice, people are invited to visualize everything through five senses reality to activate every part of the brain. And that's all great and good. But ultimately, it's because this visualization of what I think is right for me on the top of this mountain and blah, 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 with a beautiful view on the lake is what I imagine will bring me a feeling of expansiveness, of peace, of accomplishment, right? And so it's very important that we don't stay attached to the five senses reality that we have used to cultivate the feeling that we're here to manifest. Because life will bring us that feeling, but it might not look like what we imagined at all. Um,
yeah, well said. And yeah, I also wanted to ask you, and this relates to this topic and my journey since this whole dragon thing. Um, I wrote here that ancient myths speak of Guan Yin, the goddess of compassion, riding a dragon, or Krishna dancing on the head of the great serpent. And I see these myths as allegories pointing toward a possibility of allowing the awakened heart to befriend, integrate, and alchemize the dragon of primal sensual energy, allowing the dragon to become an ally in alignment with the highest good of all. I'm curious, what does that bring up for you, or how do you see that connected to your work in this conversation?
I'm very touched that you're bringing Guan Yin here. She is a very powerful guide. I invoke her in the beginning of each of the calls during my course, along with Isis. So, yes, very, very familiar with her, with the dragons, having befriended the dragons of humanity. Fundamentally, we're talking about recognizing that all of what belongs here on earth is divine and not fearing any of those energies, because fearing it continues to suppress it, right? So, as much as we don't want to live in them, perhaps in the way that you've expressed and experienced was challenging, it has great value that you can look at it in the eyes and you know where it's at, and you have now a known relationship to it instead of an unknown and unconscious relationship to it, in which it's still eating at you, but in a way that you don't know. And the awakened heart of Kuan Yin is to help each of us recognize that there isn't one concept out there that we don't have some form of relationship with. And so making them conscious and holding them with grace is the most healthy thing we can do for our mental health and our well-being.
Yeah, beautifully said, and yeah, for me, interestingly, that whole dragon thing occasioned then a really unexpected reintegration of my ancestral tradition of Christianity, actually. In the wake of that, I started having mystical experiences of Jesus Christ as this inferno of pure love in the heart, and my heart was really, like, ignited in this way that I, you know, didn't see coming, and I started just, like, bringing that pure inferno of love to all parts of myself, all parts, including, you know, the darkest dragon and the darkest aspects of reality, because really I don't find anything in reality that isn't also on some level in me, or at least the seed of it, the potentiality of it is in me, and I really feel like that love of the awakened heart of Guan Yin or of Jesus Christ, you know, whichever of these suprapersonal avatars resonates with a person, it's that fire of pure love that can hold all these parts, even the most, you know, the most brutal, the most wounded, the most rejected, the most exiled parts. It brings them all to its breast like they were its own wounded children, this great mother father energy. And through holding even the most wounded parts in that love, in my experience, and any part is able to set down its burdens and return to its original numinous, luminous template and reharmonize with the whole and rediscover that it is it belongs in the ecology of reality, and it's, you know, it is a child of God too. Even, you know, the things that people demonize the most, those are the children of God that are most in need of that awakened love from the heart of hearts. So yeah, it's been a deep journey around that, and so it's nice to hear some kind of affirmation coming from you that you've had a similar, uh, you know, you're seeing similar things from your experiences. So mm.
Yeah. One one thing that it brings up, the beautiful description that you just spoke of everything belonging to the ecology of the world is that in fact there are qualities and frequencies that are in the depths of our human hearts that help us live the sort of life, the purest quality of life, which is in the radiation of love. And I will call that the pearl. And when we have emotions that we consider challenging, that are grief or sadness or misunderstanding or conflict or anger, or any of those experiences that we consider dark, they're always in relationship to this pearl. So w- I get angry when something that is so sacred to me is threatened. And therefore, this anger is a mirror to what is sacred to me that I'm defending with my life. Right. And so, in that way, we can recognize that, and sadness or any other aspects that we will put into those emotions that we want to demonize. In fact, they do have a direct relationship with this pearl. And so once we understand that, we can help, understand the logic that they took to be now harmful and toxic to the host or its environment. It's in an effort of protecting that beautiful central kernel.
Yeah, I love that. I love how that helps redeem everything and puts everything in its proper context. And you can see even these most violent impulses as protectors that arose from a deep wound and are just trying to protect that part from being wounded in that way again. Yeah. So amazing. Thank you for those elucidations. And one more question for you today is just if you had an opportunity to send one message to everyone in the world in this moment, perhaps about how to have more beautiful relationships, what would it be?
Take your hand, place it on your heart. It would be to take the time to be well with the love that you are emanating from your being back into your being, and not to underestimate how much you can heal yourself. Do not underestimate how much this this healing power you have at all times and you're sitting on. And when you know how to care for yourself, you can care for others, and all your relationship are going to blossom and thrive, and it's going to be so much fun.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And where can people find your work if they want to find you?
My website, sit with Nora, SIT with Nora and ORA.com. My Instagram, sit with Nora. Those are two good places. Mhm.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Nora. It's been amazing. I wish you all the best as always. Take good care.
Mhm. You too, Jordan. Take care. It was a pleasure being here.
Hmm.